くあなたの思いは確かに受け止めならば私は
同じだよね。Atomic.
どこへ誰が
As the summer break commences, the majority of students set off for their hometowns, but Sid elects to remain in the dormitory. Despite his initial excitement at the prospect of solitude, he soon realizes that he is at a loss for things to do. Just as he begins to feel restless, he receives a letter from Alpha mentioning a mysterious place called Lindworm. On the other hand, Epsilon is in high spirits and starts her day with a smile. She is reminded of her encounter with Shadow and how he had saved her and gifted her with the power of slime magic. The magic empowers her to alter her appearance, and she takes advantage of this by increasing the size of her bust. Beta, inspired by the bravery of Shadow, is in the process of writing a novel about Shadow saving a woman from the clutches of Zenon Griffey. However, after hitting a writer's block, Beta takes a break to clear her mind and heads outside. Coincidentally, she runs into Epsilon, who boasts about Shadow's recent infatuation with her, particularly her bust size. Beta, skeptical about Epsilon's claims, is told that their enhanced busts make them more susceptible to such glances. Epsilon playfully teases Beta, asking if she has received any similar attention from Shadow. Just then, Nu arrives to deliver a new directive from Alpha, bringing an end to the lighthearted banter between Epsilon and Beta. Iris and Alexia, eager to prepare for Alexia's journey to the Sacred Land, visit Gamma's store, where they are greeted by the friendly and welcoming Gamma, who introduces herself as Luna. Upon learning of their intentions, Luna offers to show them some common items for everyday use. However, when Alexia expresses interest in purchasing some lingerie, Iris is hesitant, but eventually gives in to Alexia's confidence and charm. Meanwhile, after the traumatic terrorist attack, Rose is overjoyed to hear that Sid is alive and rushes to find him. Upon seeing him covered in bandages, she realizes that his deep love for her must have been what saved him. She accepts his love and vows to give him her heart. As the two travel together towards the Sacred Land, Rose shares her hopes for their future, expressing her belief that with hard work and dedication, they can have a happy life together. As they journey on, Sid feels a sense of regret for not running to the Sacred Land, instead opting for the slower train ride. However, Rose reassures him and shares her hopes that he will be able to participate in the goddess's trial and earn her father's approval. She remains hopeful for their future, and together, they forge ahead towards the unknown, hand in hand. Wow, yet another girl has fallen in love with our protagonist. As Sid and Rose continue to explore Lindworm, they suddenly come across a display of keychains depicting a sword piercing a demonic arm. Rose explains the legend behind it, revealing that it symbolizes the moment when Olivier cut off the left arm of the demon Diablos. Apparently, the ruins known as the Sanctuary nearby holds the sealed left arm of Diablos. While strolling, Rose comes across a signing event of the author Natsume, who she is a huge fan of. They quickly line up and Rose expresses her admiration for Natsume's original and imaginative works. Sid takes a closer look at the books on display and notices titles such as Romeo e Julieta, Asherella, Star Wars It's a Trap, One Purse, and Dragon Bowl. However, as he flips through the pages, he realizes that these books are not original at all and are actually plagiarized. The thought crosses his mind that someone else may have reincarnated like him, and he decides to investigate. To his surprise, he discovers that Natsume is actually Beta, who used her wisdom to become famous by stealing stories. Sid recalls that Beta told him she loved literature, but he never imagined she would steal his own stories. Beta signs a book and hands it to Sid, stating that it contains all the details of the mission. Excited to see what Natsume wrote in her book, Rose eagerly shows it to Sid, but to their surprise, they find that the writing is in an ancient language, which Rose only knows a bit of. Sid speculates that Natsume wrote in this language because it is cool. Meanwhile, Alpha is standing next to Archbishop Drake's dead body, trying to piece together what he was hiding that led to his murder. Suddenly, Sid sees a man running on a rooftop and decides to stop him. The man attacks, but Sid easily blocks, and Epsilon shows up, taking out the man with ease. She reveals that the target was the cult's executioner, but he has gone into hiding. Epsilon informs Sid that they will be moving to Plan B, but Sid states that he will be proceeding with his own plans. At the start of the next episode, Sid's love for hot springs takes him to Lindworm, where he stumbles upon Alexia at the hot spring. To his surprise, she is a special guest for the annual Goddess's Trial, a fighting ritual where ancient warriors awaken to compete against challenges. Only those deemed worthy by the warriors can participate, and only a handful of people get to battle each other. Alexia explains she is not there to fight, but to investigate the murder of the Archbishop. Despite her offer to explain more about the situation if he joins the Crimson Knights, Sid declines, noting his aversion to looking at people at hot springs for comfort. Alexia assumes Sid is oogling her, but he clarifies he's not even looking at her. When Alexia comments on Sid's Excalibur, he stands up, stating that she shouldn't judge a book by its cover and that the true power of the Holy Sword lies in its unsheathed state. As Sid leaves, he sets Alexia's mind spinning with the mysterious allusions to his weapon. To clarify, he was talking about his crotch this whole time. With great anticipation, the new acting Archbishop, Jack Nelson, took the stage to make an important announcement. With a firm voice, he declared that the planned audit with Alexia had been cancelled. He explained that Alexia had been investigating the previous Archbishop, but unfortunately, he had since passed away, and they would now be focusing their efforts on investigating his death. The mood in the room shifted as the focus shifted to the highly anticipated Goddess's Trial. Alexia, now donning her Natsume Kafta personality, took her seat next to Beta. Despite the excitement in the air, Alexia couldn't help but feel annoyed at how much Natsume was beloved, leading her to speculate that those who were well-liked were often the most corrupt on the inside. Beta, on the other hand, had her sights set on Alexia, feeling frustrated that she had used Sid. And like Alexia, Beta also believed that Alexia was corrupt on the inside. As the trial began, the first contender, Tope Batirius from Oriana Kingdom, stepped forward. Two audience members behind Sid whispered to each other, explaining the rules of the trial. If a warrior was summoned, they couldn't leave the barrier around the arena until one of them was defeated. With a large fee to participate and the possibility of getting killed, the reward for winning was a commemorative medal, which would easily grant entry into any knight order in the world. Tope issued his challenge, but to no avail, as no warriors came forward to face him. The same was the case for Nex Tinline from Midgar Knight Order. Sid, meanwhile, was eager to show off his skills with Shadow. His eagerness sparked curiosity among the audience, who wondered just who he was. However, like Tope and Nex, Still Ain't Happenin' from Laugus Vigilante Corps was unable to summon anyone to face him. Despite the valiant efforts of the contenders, the trial was off to a disappointing start, with no warrior stepping forward to accept their challenges. Soon, it is Sid's turn. As Sid, aka Shadow, enters the arena, he is faced with a dilemma. On one hand, if he reveals his true strength, the ancient warriors may match it, exposing his true power. On the other hand, if he refuses to participate, he risks getting expelled from Midgar Academy for Dark Knights. But Sid is a clever one. He chooses a third option and uses a light distraction to jump into the arena as Shadow. Sid soon realizes that his opponent is the infamous Witch of Calamity, Aurora. Jack, Beta, and Alexia all have different opinions on Aurora, with Jack warning that she is the most powerful witch in history, while Alexia believes that Shadow's powers must have reached her level to summon her. The battle between Shadow and Aurora begins, and it's clear from the start that they are both relishing the fight. At first, Shadow is merely observing and dodging Aurora's attacks, but he soon realizes that she is holding back and defeats her with a single slash, wishing he could have fought her at full strength. As the battle ends, Shadow leaves, shocking everyone with his victory. The barrier breaks and a magic door appears in the middle of the arena, marking the end of the trial. As Sid ponders over his success, he suddenly notices a magical door appearing right beside him. Initially, he tries to move away from it, but as the door follows him, he realizes that he won't be able to escape its presence. Finally, resigning himself to the fact, Sid decides to venture into the door. Meanwhile, another door emerges in the middle of the arena, leaving Nelson perplexed. He speculates that the sanctuary might have responded to Shadow and that the door only appears for those who are deemed worthy enough to pass through it. Nelson promptly issues orders to evacuate the citizens and cancel the trial. He tries to convince Alexia and Rose to leave the area, but Alpha from the Shadow Garden intervenes and asks them to remain still until the door is closed. Alpha then steps into the door, leading the way. As Epsilon has defeated Nelson's guards, she declares that she will be accompanying them inside the gate. However, Nelson refuses and calls upon Venom, his guard, to eliminate Epsilon. Venom attempts to strike her with his sword, but Epsilon deftly dodges the attack. Unluckily, the sword slash cuts through her fake slime breasts, exposing her true form. In a bid to cover up her identity, Epsilon quickly reattaches her breasts and dispatches Venom with these. She then asks Nelson if he had seen anything, to which Nelson denies, keeping her secret safe. Epsilon then grabs Nelson and jumps into the door, followed by other members of the Shadow Garden who take Beta as a hostage. The door begins to close, but Alexia and Rose, determined to follow their friends, jump in at the last moment. As Alexia and Rose arrive at Alpha's location, Alexia tries to explain her fall, but Alpha quickly brushes it off and explains the significance of their current surroundings. He reveals that this is the place where Olivier, a hero, had cut off the left arm of the Diablos, and they are here to learn more about the cult. However, they are aware that Nelson won't talk. Alpha then points out a statue of Olivier, which surprises the girls as it depicts an elf woman. To their surprise, Alpha reveals that her face is identical to Olivier's, leading them to suspect that she was a possessed elf. Meanwhile, Sid finds himself in a room with Aurora. He questions her about his arrival, but she is just as clueless. She shares her memories of a fight they had, but her memories are incomplete. As Sid decides to head back, Aurora stops him and asks for his help. She reveals that she is wearing a straitjacket and that they both have the same goal of leaving this place. She explains that they are in a memory prison, known as the Sanctuary, created from ancient battles. To be freed, they must go to the center and destroy the magical core, but they must not use magic as it will be absorbed. Aurora and Sid agree to work together, and with their combined efforts, they hope to be freed from the Sanctuary. Aurora shares that once they are free, she will vanish into nothing. The journey ahead of them is uncertain, but they know that their goal is to leave this memory prison and start a new chapter in their lives. Alpha and the group continue their exploration of the facility, and Alpha sheds light on its past. He explains that the cult had once gathered orphan children for experiments, but most of them perished. Only a small group of girls managed to survive. Meanwhile, Sid and Aurora stumble upon a memory of a young Aurora, who is crying. To move forward, Aurora decides to confront her past and slaps the young version of herself, telling her that crying won't change anything. The memory shatters, and the group is transported back to the present. Alpha goes on to reveal that Olivier, one of the surviving girls, was deemed as one of the compatible children and was implanted with Diablos' cells. Nelson states that they had no other option as they needed power to fight the demon. Olivier was given the mission to extract new cells from Diablos, but no matter how many parts she cut, the demon still lived. The cult used powerful artifacts to immobilize Olivier's left arm and gained more Diablos' cells, which they used to create the red pills, but the side effects were too strong, and they needed to create a pill that would grant tremendous power and an ageless body. Alpha points to a man in the memory who is revealed to be the same man as Nelson. Nelson explains that the drug, called the Beads of Diablos, had two flaws. The first flaw is that they need to take the beads once a year or the effect will disappear. The second flaw is that they can only produce small amounts, which is why the Knights of Rounds only consist of 12 members. They believe the key to perfecting the beads lies in the demon's arm and the descendants of Olivier's blood. Alpha asks Nelson, calling him the 11th of the rounds, if her theories are correct. Nelson confirms and introduces himself as Nelson the Avaricious. But before he can continue boasting, Delta stabs him from behind, causing him to fall into the water. Nelson emerges from the water, breaking the memory and dividing the group into different sections. He multiplies himself, ready to face Alpha and Delta.
同じだよね Atomic.
We cut to Delta and Alpha battling Nelson. As Delta effortlessly slices through Nelson's copies, she can't shake the feeling that something is amiss. Nelson sheds some light on the situation, revealing that the further they venture into the center of the sanctuary, the more their powers are depleted. Alpha reinforces this point, highlighting that simultaneously, Nelson grows stronger the closer he gets to the center. Despite his desire to delve even deeper, Nelson ultimately concedes that this current proximity should be enough to defeat them. Meanwhile, Sid and Aurora encounter a new memory, a war-torn battlefield littered with casualties. They find young Aurora, who is once again in tears, as she tries to grab Sid's sword with the intention of ending the memory by killing herself. Just as she's about to strike, however, the dead return to life and start attacking them. Aurora explains that the sanctuary is rejecting them. Sid ponders what would happen if Aurora were to die, and she surmises that she would simply return to the first room where they met. As the Epsilon group stumbles upon an enemy, they come across a sick individual who, as Epsilon passes through, mysteriously disappears. Epsilon deduces that this must have been a memory that materialized in response to their presence. They stumble upon an archive filled with information about the possessed and realize that they could have fallen victim to the same fate if they hadn't met Shadow. Ita, drawing on knowledge from Shadow, has created Polaroid cameras and they take pictures of the information they've discovered. As Sid and Aurora sit down, Sid muses on the fact that the Chosen One must be a direct descendant. Meanwhile, Delta continues to obliterate Nelson, who is in shock at her power. Alexia, watching the fight, ponders if Delta is really working with Shadow. She notes that Delta's fighting style is nothing like Shadow's sophisticated techniques. As Delta defeats another wave of Nelson's copies, the memory breaks and Nelson is left stunned by her abilities. Alpha and Epsilon join the fray, and Alpha explains that they have completed their investigation and are now ready to leave. Nelson is shocked that they are retreating, but Alpha calmly explains that their goal was to cut off the source of power, and they have now learned the sanctuary's defenses. With this information, Alpha promises that they will return again. As Sid and Aurora sit, Aurora ponders the sword in front of the door and explains that it is written on it that it can cut the chains. Sid attempts to pull it out, but realizes that he is not the Chosen One. Aurora then reads a sign that states the Holy Sword can only be drawn by direct descendants. She is surprised that Sid was able to decipher the magical inscription so quickly. Sid explains that he is well versed in all standard formulas and has memorized countless magical scripts. With no other option to open the door, the two sit and wait. As Alpha and the rest depart, Nelson's thoughts are consumed by what he should say to the group. He considers explaining his motives for luring them to the sanctuary with the intention of exposing their identities and using Alpha's blood to perfect the beads. Suddenly, a notification flashes on his screen, alerting him to someone's presence in the sanctuary center. Sid turns to Aurora and asks if she wants to disappear, but Aurora explains that once the core is destroyed, she will be freed from this eternal prison of memories. Sid reassures her that things will soon work out, anticipating the arrival of the protagonist, who he believes will be able to extract the sword. However, to Sid's surprise, Nelson makes an appearance, leading him to wonder if this is one of those scenarios where the antagonist tries to stop the protagonist. But then he spots Olivier, who has the same face as Alpha, and he knows that things are about to get ugly. Nelson orders Olivier to attack, and Sid steps forward to face her. Despite her formidable strength, Sid manages to block her attacks, but he is eventually sent flying and his sword is shattered. Nelson can't comprehend why Sid is still smiling, but Sid realizes that he indeed is. The fight continues with Olivier injuring Sid, who notes that the battle is tedious without conversation and that she has no heart to answer his questions. Nelson orders Olivier to finish Sid off, but Aurora jumps in and pleads for him to stop. She knows that no human can defeat Olivier, but she thanks Sid for giving her new memories. Nelson offers to spare Sid's life if Aurora agrees to help him, but Sid interrupts, declaring that he doesn't need anyone's help and that they shouldn't assume he will lose. Frustrated, Nelson orders Olivier to kill Sid, and she jumps in and stabs him. But to everyone's shock, Sid opens his right eye, revealing that he had planned this all along. He got them, and the outcome of the battle has taken a dramatic turn. Wow, what an epic fight! As Olivier unsheathed her sword and lunged forward, Sid was ready. With lightning-fast reflexes, he grabbed her arm and sank his teeth into her neck, tearing it open in a brutal display of power. Nelson watched in awe, wondering how Sid was still alive after being stabbed. Sid explained to Nelson that if you protect your vital organs and arteries, it's relatively easy to survive a stabbing, but Nelson was still stunned, amazing that a mere kid without any magic could defeat Olivier. He quickly realized, however, that she was just a copy. With a flick of his wrist, Nelson summoned countless copies of Olivier, each one eager to take down Sid. But Sid was ready for the challenge. He opened his right eye and with a burst of magic, he defeated them all. Nelson was astounded, unable to believe that Sid was using magic. Sid explained that he had simply tempered with the magic until it was too solid to be absorbed. It had taken him some time, but it was something simple. Despite his newfound knowledge, Nelson ordered the Olivier copies to kill Sid. The battle was intense, with Sid fighting off the copies with everything he had. But as his wounds continued to bleed, he knew that the playtime was over. He decided to take out all the copies at once and began casting his ultimate spell, I Am the All-Range Atomic. Just as Sid was about to finish his spell, one of the Oliviers snuck up behind him and stabbed him in the heart. But even this was not enough to stop him. Unfazed, Sid finished his spell, unleashing an explosion of magic that obliterated all the Oliviers, along with the chained door and everything else. Aurora was shocked by the sheer amount of magic that Sid possessed. It was clear that this was a power not to be underestimated. As Sid wakes up with Aurora by his side, he is shocked to see her still there, especially after being stabbed in the heart. However, he explains that he used magic to move his heart to the other side, which surprises Aurora even more. But then, she begins to fade away and confesses that she was the one who called Sid there. She admits that she lied about many things, but Sid is still fine with it, as he has grown fond of her. Aurora reveals that for a long time she wanted to disappear and forget everything, but now she has a memory she doesn't want to forget, and she thanks Sid for that. In turn, Sid also expresses his gratitude, stating that he had a good time too. As she disappears completely, she leaves Sid with instructions on what to do if he ever meets the real her. Meanwhile, Alexia, Rose, and Natsume come together to assess the aftermath of Sid's spell. Feeling frustrated with her own weakness, Alexia expresses her desire to start an organization with Rose and Natsume to gather information and decide on their next steps. Both Rose and Natsume agree, and although they have no concrete plan, they form a team. Epsilon reports to Alpha about the destruction of the sanctuary and the disappearance of the Holy Sword and the magical core. Alpha comments that this was the simplest and most effective solution, and he congratulates Shadow. Epsilon also reveals that Beta is working with Alexia and may be infiltrating her inner circle. Epsilon wonders if she should report this to Shadow, but Alpha assures her that he already knows everything. Meanwhile, a man tries to convince Gamma to buy a prime property in Madlid and open her shopping center there. Gamma isn't sure at first, but as one of her employees tells her that they have found petroleum, Gamma decides to buy every property in that street and explains she wants to redevelop the city and make it the greatest in the Vegalta Empire. Meanwhile, Alpha and the rest guess that Delta is still in the Sacred Land, but decide to leave her alone as they believe she will return home when she gets cold. Alpha recalls a previous experience with Sid, and she explains that they need to start training the girls as they will be facing the cult and need to enhance their individual strengths. Alpha receives news that the Royal Chancellor Perv Asshat will be visiting the royal capital of Midgar. Alexia explains to Iris that the Archbishop is part of the cult. To keep the sanctuary a secret, they need a big organization, and Alexia wants to investigate the divine teachings. Iris had suggested the same thing to their father, but he told them not to do anything. However, Iris feels that if she wins the Bushin Festival again, she will have more backing and support from the people, and her father will have to listen to her. Alexia wonders if the cult or Shadow Garden won't get involved, but Iris is confident in her sword skills. Iris wonders why Alexia went into the sanctuary as he didn't tell her to do so. Alexia then acts a bit dumb and excuses himself and leaves. Iris notes to herself that the Crimson Knights lost their strongest members and probably won't be able to rebuild them. The Night Order supports her, but she guesses they hate her as she took their strongest members and let them die. Iris feels she needs to win the tournament and show them a path. We then cut to Rose training. Suddenly she feels strange and demonic possession appears on her chest. At the start of episode 15, the Bunshin Festival begins. The strongest warriors from all corners of the world converge to participate. Sid, inspired by the sight, yearns to join the tournament and showcase his hidden strength. Undeterred by the prospect of being seen as weak, Sid visits Gamma and requests her help with a disguise. Although Gamma questions his motives, Sid remains tight-lipped. With a special slime gel, Gamma transforms Sid into Mundane Man, a lazy Dark Knight who was disowned and died as a mediocre fighter. However, Anne Rose, who had previously summoned an ancient warrior, recognizes Sid in his disguise and warns him not to participate in the tournament. Sid, confident in his disguise, brushes off her warning and walks away with a smirk. Quentin, a seasoned participant, soon intervenes and advises Sid to heed Anne Rose's warning. Frustrated by Sid's defiance, Quentin beats him up in an alley. Despite the violence, Sid maintains his weak demeanor, knowing that he is capable of defeating Quentin, but has no intention of revealing his true strength just yet. Anne Rose eventually stops Quentin. Anne Rose explains her reason for letting Quentin beat Sid. However, she expresses her surprise at the fact that Sid wasn't hurt, even though Quentin was putting up quite a fight. She then introduces herself and inquires about Sid's name, which he reveals to be Mundane Man. With this newfound information, Sid proceeds to meet with Skell Atal, who has a keen interest in making bets and winning money in the tournament. Skell Atal explains the proceedings of the tournament, starting with the preliminary rounds and only the strongest participants proceeding to the main event. He also mentions the favorites, but Sid wants to keep his powers hidden and is considering a strategy to defeat stronger opponents without revealing his true abilities. As Sid leaves, he bumps into Anne Rose again, who tells him about her close friendship with Alexia and Natsume Kafka. She also explains her upcoming meeting with her father and the introduction to her fiancé, Perv Asshat. Anne Rose reveals her past as a princess from a land of art and culture, but her desire to become a knight has led her to disappoint and betray people in her life. Despite this, she remains steadfast in her beliefs and ideals, which may result in further betrayals. She asks Sid if he will continue to believe in her, to which he confirms with a nod. We cut to Sid and Skell watching a match between two contenders. Despite Sid's disinterest in the fight, Skell and Goldo Kinmeki are fully immersed in the action. Skell is gathering data to make more informed bets, and Goldo is fascinated by this approach. He explains that he too tabulates data in order to win. As the next match begins, Gonzales Macomb versus Mundane Man, Sid takes a brief break, but Goldo takes the opportunity to analyze the fight. He notes Gonzalez's experience and strength, demonstrated by his glinting eyes and arrogant smile, with a battle power of 1,364. In contrast, Mundane Man appears weak, with a battle power of only 33. However, as soon as the fight begins, Gonzalez falls, much to the disappointment of the crowd. But Anne Rose saw Mundane's quick punches to Gonzalez's chin, proving that he was the true winner. Goldo is impressed by this outcome and sees the opportunity to bet on weaker fighters. The next day, Goldo is set to face Mundane in the 4th round. Skell tries to convince Sid to give him all of his money to bet on Goldo, but Sid refuses. The next morning, Skell wakes Sid with shocking news. Rose has stabbed her fiancé and fled. The excitement and drama of the tournament continues to escalate. What a way to end an episode. Why did Rose attack her fiancé? What will Sid do in response? At the start of episode 16, we cut to Alexia and Beta discussing Rose's situation. Despite the Oriana Kingdom's request for independence, Alexia is determined to speak with Rose directly to gather as much information as possible. Meanwhile, Beta begins to gather his own intelligence, determined to find out what happened to Rose. In the meantime, Alexia decides to seek the advice of her sister, hoping she may have some insight into the matter. However, Beta is aware that Alexia's sister may also provide more information on Perv Asshat, which could potentially keep her occupied and prevent her from getting into any trouble. Meanwhile, Beta receives news that Rose has made her way through the sewers and into the underground ruins. This news only heightens their urgency to find her before the Oriana Kingdom does. On the other hand, Sid is grappling with his own troubles. As the eminence of Shadow, he is faced with the dilemma of what to do next. During a break in the tournament fights, he is approached by Beatrix, who is searching for her sister's daughter. When Sid denies any knowledge of her whereabouts, Beatrix draws her sword and threatens to kill him. Sid is able to deflect the attack, but he is left shaken by the encounter. Beatrix apologizes for her actions, acknowledging that she had underestimated Sid's strength. Quentin, upon seeing Anne Rose, immediately assumes that she has come to watch Mundane Man's fight, just like the day before. Intrigued by her thoughts on his previous match, he approaches her and inquires about what she thinks of it. Anne Rose replies that she believes Mundane's opponent tripped and lost, but Quentin isn't so sure. Despite not being able to see anything himself, he is confident that Anne Rose can explain it. Anne Rose, however, explains that she wasn't able to see everything as the opponent's movements were too fast for her to follow. She did see Mundane's right hand moving, but the subsequent events were just too quick for her to keep up. Quentin then speculates that Mundane used some sort of artifact, but Anne Rose can't rule out the possibility that he didn't break any rules. The two are sure that the upcoming fight between Mundane and Golden Kinmeki will reveal the truth. Anne Rose informs Quentin that Goldo has never lost a fight and only forfeits against opponents who could potentially defeat him. He is known as the Unbeaten, but prefers to be called the Ever Victorious. As the fight between Mundane and Goldo begins, Quentin realizes that Anne Rose's observation means that either Goldo couldn't see Mundane's true strength or Mundane was cheating. The fight starts with Goldo rushing at Mundane, swinging his sword, but Mundane effortlessly cracks his neck and dodges the attack. Quentin is amazed by what he sees, but can't understand what happened, and Rose explains that Mundane managed to dodge the attack by cracking his neck. Quentin finds it hard to believe, but Anne Rose wonders if it's not just a coincidence. Goldo, feeling humiliated, decides to get serious and creates a golden dragon using his magical powers. But to everyone's surprise, Mundane simply sneezes and blows away both the dragon and Goldo, effectively defeating him. Anne Rose notes that Goldo was stronger than she expected, and if he fought more often against stronger knights, he could have become quite good. Quentin is left wondering what Mundane did, and Anne Rose explains that she thinks he sneezed, and in that moment, his sword also swung down, defeating Goldo. Quentin finds it hard to believe, but decides to leave and says that if Mundane continues to win, he will eventually face him and show him what he's made of. And Rose, inspired by Mundane's movements, starts cracking her neck and sneezing, wondering if she can move like him. Despite Perv Asshat's lack of concern for increased security measures, Iris firmly presents the security plan for the Bushin Festival. Perv, however, brushes off the plan and boasts about his good appearance, which was exaggerated by the news. He speculates that Midgar's concern is due to the recent kidnapping of Alexia and reveals his intention to personally search for her, just as Iris did. Meanwhile, Mundane's sudden and impressive victory over Quentin has left many onlookers in disbelief and questioning the safety of betting on him in the future. Undeterred, Mundane advances to the main tournament, where he is set to face Anne Rose. As Mundane and Anne Rose face off in the tunnel, Anne Rose acknowledges Mundane's strength, but warns him that she has seen all of his moves. Mundane responds with a confident smile, removing one of his armor plates and revealing its immense weight. He explains that the armor was holding him back and that it's time for the real fight to begin. And Rose, however, is not intimidated and reminds Mundane not to assume victory. She demonstrates her own strength by cracking her neck, causing Mundane to step back in surprise. With a hint of curiosity, Mundane moves past Anne Rose, wondering what she had been trying to prove. Meanwhile, we cut to Rose running down a tunnel and fighting off her pursuers. As Sid contemplates his strategy for the arena, Skell suddenly bursts into his room, armed with a plan to strike it rich. He presents Sid with a tantalizing offer. A reward awaits whoever can turn in Rose or provide information on her whereabouts. Skell urges Sid to join forces with him and hunt down Rose, eager to cash in on the bounty. However, as Sid contemplates Skell's proposal, he spots his sister approaching and decides to keep his distance. With a quick escape through the window, Sid joins Skell on the streets, eager to pursue the promise of wealth. While strolling through the city, the sounds of a piano catch Sid's ear, and he can't help but admire the skilled player. Memories of his previous life flood back as he recalls how he was forced to learn the instrument. Though he would have preferred to focus on his training to become eminence in Shadow, however, over time, Sid came to appreciate the beauty of piano playing. As he recognizes the melody, Sid begins to question if it belongs in this world. Driven by curiosity, he decides to seek out the source of the music, suspecting it might be another reincarnated soul like himself. To his surprise, he discovers that the pianist is none other than Epsilon, who has leveraged the knowledge Sid imparted to her to become a famous composer. After her performance, Sid approaches her and compliments her on playing Moonlight Sonata. Epsilon confides that it's her favorite piece from all the music he taught her. Sid realizes with a jolt that Epsilon has plagiarized all the music he shared with her and has reaped rewards and gained powerful connections as a result. When Sid inquires about Rose's whereabouts, Epsilon reveals that Beta is already on the case, and she has heard rumors that Rose is hiding in the tunnels beneath the royal capital. Sid thanks Epsilon and makes his exit, but as he glances back at the piano, a smile creeps onto his face. However, as Beta and Alexia delve deeper into the tunnels, they encounter a series of twists and turns. With each step, they are met with the growing realization that the cult's reach is far-reaching, and their hold on Oriana is stronger than anyone could have imagined. Beta, who has been working closely with Iris, mentions that they have uncovered some crucial information. Apparently, Perv Asshat has been communicating with the cult leaders and is acting as a mole within the kingdom. This discovery raises serious questions about the loyalty of the king's own guard and forces Alexia to rethink her previous assumptions. While they navigate the labyrinthine tunnels, Alexia shares her own insights about Perv's motives. She believes that his ultimate goal is to destabilize the kingdom and seize power for himself. With the Bushin festival fast approaching, time is of the essence, and they must act quickly. As Rose follows the sound of the Moonlight Sonata, she is captivated by its beauty. Guided by the music, she soon finds the source, Shadow playing the piano with masterful skill. Despite having heard the sonata countless times, she is in awe of this performance. When Shadow finishes, he turns to her, asking what it is she hopes to achieve. Rose replies that she wants to protect those she loves, but feels powerless to do so. Shadow wonders if she is ready to give up, but Rose is determined. She has things she wants to do, people she wants to protect. In response, Shadow offers her his power, telling her that true strength lies not in one's abilities, but in one's way of being. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Rose accepts Shadow's gift and, with his help, defeats the members of the cult to confront her. Alexia and Beta, drawn by the surge of magic, come upon Rose, who proudly declares that she has obtained new power and is now following her own path. Despite Alexia's curiosity, Rose refuses to divulge any information, not wanting to put her in danger. But Alexia is relentless and draws her sword, intent on making Rose talk. The two engage in battle, but Rose proves to be the stronger of the two. She leaves Alexia in Beta's care, noting that they may have different paths, but they all share a common goal. Finally, as the day comes to a close, Sid returns home, only to be surprised to find his sister still waiting for him. As Claire strangles Sid, she vents out her frustration towards his repeated broken promises. Despite her anger, she hands him a ticket to the Bushin Festival, telling him to be there and watch her perform as she is replacing Princess Rose. Meanwhile, Sid's journey to the festival begins. As he reaches the festival, he discovers that the ticket his sister gave him isn't an ordinary one, but a hyper VIP seating. Upon reaching his seat, he is surprised to see Iris Midgar and assumes he got it wrong. But to his surprise, Iris recognizes him as Claire's brother and explains that he is in the correct seat. She also apologizes for the Zenin Griffey incident, which draws attention from the students. Sid starts to worry as he is just a background character and not used to the spotlight. Some students approach Iris and ask if she has her eye on any competitor. Iris explains that she is interested in Anne Rose, but still intends to win the tournament. Sid wonders if there is someone else who caught her eye, but the students dismiss the idea, stating that Mundane Man is just fast and lucky with no real skill. Sid is pleased with the reputation he cultivated for Mundane. However, Iris explains that there is one more person who has caught her eye, an elf who was also the first Bushin Festival champion. Although she won't be competing, the mere mention of her name draws attention from the students. Sid recalls Beatrix and realizes he knew she was strong, but never knew she was famous. The students reveal that Beatrix has not shown her face in public for over a decade. Sid then excuses himself and leaves, feeling the presence of someone strong. Despite this, he acts surprised when Beatrix shows up after him. She wonders if he was ignoring her, but he denies it, insisting that he did not run into an elf that looks like her. Beatrix, who had brought too many burgers, offers one to Sid, who in turn gives one of his burgers to her as a token of gratitude. Meanwhile, Perv Asshat takes Sid's seat and starts a conversation with Iris. He reveals that his king will be attending the festival tomorrow and inquires about Iris's father, Klaus Midgar. Iris informs him that her father will also be watching from tomorrow. Perv then sees Anne Rose and expresses his interest in inviting her to work for his kingdom, recognizing her as a fencer of great caliber. When asked about Anne Rose's opponent, Mundane Man, Iris states that she sees him for the first time and does not find him very strong, but there is an unnerving uncertainty in his eyes that makes her unsure of Anne Rose's win. The fight between Anne Rose and Mundane begins, with Anne Rose attacking immediately. However, Mundane parries or dodges her attacks with ease. She slashes him, thinking she has found a way to defeat him, but Mundane appears behind her and tells her it was just an afterimage. Mundane then overpowers her, causing her to realize that she must try to counterattack when he attacks. However, as she waits for him to attack, she realizes that Mundane was still matching his attack to hers, not the opposite. In the end, Mundane slashes and defeats Anne Rose. Perv asserts that Iris was indeed correct. In response, Iris is taken aback by the fact that someone as formidable as Mundane had gone unnoticed for so long. Perv then announces that the next round would be Iris versus Mundane and ponders if she is ready to face the challenge. Iris confidently declares that although she may not be able to match Mundane's dazzling swordplay, it is not beauty that determines the winner. If Mundane's technique is all he has to offer, then she is not intimidated. Nevertheless, she is aware that there is a strong possibility that Mundane has some hidden tricks up his sleeve, which is why he had been disguising his stance and technique throughout the tournament. Later, as Perv departs, he instructs his man to investigate Mundane, stating that it could be problematic if he is backed by the lawless city. His man questions if Mundane is a part of the Shadow Garden, but Perv dismisses the idea, explaining that he is a man and he also doubts that the Shadow Garden would have a reason to cause a disturbance during the Bushin Festival. Meanwhile, Anne Rose thanks Mundane for the lesson after losing to him, and explains that she left her home to become stronger. She expresses her curiosity about how Mundane became so powerful, to which he replies that he had abandoned everything in his quest for strength. Sid realizes that he had accomplished 70% of his plan at the Bushin Festival. He starts to contemplate his next move, pondering whether he should simply disappear after defeating Iris or take the evil route and act like an assassin from a shadowy organization. Upon returning home, Sid is surprised to find Claire waiting for him, who inquires about his enjoyment of her match. Sid then realizes that he's in some deep trouble.
どこへ誰が
Iris focuses on her sword practice, reminiscing about her journey from being a young girl who won her first battle to the skilled warrior she is today. With a steely determination in her eyes, she is eager to prove that she has the power to stand up against the divine teachings. Meanwhile, Sid is enjoying the VIP treatment, reveling in the fact that the maids are fulfilling his every whim without charge. Sitting beside him is Iris, who assumes he is there to support his sister. She mentions that she is free today as she too has a duel. Noticing that Sid is sipping on a cup of coffee, Iris comments that she likes the aroma but isn't fond of bitter flavors. Sid offers a valuable piece of advice, saying that with the addition of milk and sugar, every type of coffee tastes the same. Intrigued, Iris takes a sip of the milk coffee and finds it delicious. As Iris continues with her practice, she hears a commotion near the guards. It turns out to be none other than Beatrix, who is stopped with a sword in her hand. Iris recognizes her and explains that she invited Beatrix. The crowd swarms around Beatrix, excited to see her. Beatrix takes the opportunity to ask if anyone has seen her niece, but unfortunately, no one has. The topic then shifts to the competitors, and Beatrix surprises everyone by revealing that Sid has caught her eye. The revelation causes a stir among the spectators, as Sid is not considered to be an outstanding fighter. Some even question Beatrix's skills. All in all, Iris and Sid's interactions, Beatrix's arrival, and the subsequent conversations among the crowd have created an atmosphere of excitement and intrigue, leaving the spectators wondering what's in store for the upcoming duels. Perv Asshat is up to his old tricks again, drugging King Oriana with a concoction that leaves him smelling like a sweet bouquet. But Perv is not pleased with this side effect and orders his men to mask the scent with a heavy perfume. He's convinced that Rose will come to rescue her father, but he's also scheming to use her as a test subject for the cult's experimentation. If Rose fails to appear, Perv plans to use King Oriana as a pawn to trigger a war between kingdoms, leading to the destruction of Oriana and his inevitable downfall. But Perv's plan is not foolproof. As he worries about Mundane Man and his potential to foil his scheme, he also frets about the mysterious Shadow Garden and their possible allegiance with Rose. As Perv takes his seat in the VIP section, Beatrix, the war goddess, calls him out for his stench. Perv is furious and orders her taken away, but Iris intervenes and reveals her identity. Perv recognizes her as a possible candidate for the hero's blood and realizes he needs to tread carefully. As the matches continue, Claire emerges victorious and Iris prepares to face Mundane Man. But things take a dangerous turn when Iris loses her focus and finds herself in Mundane's striking range. Meanwhile, Rose approaches the VIP seating only to be confronted by dead cult members and a group of Shadow Garden members who encourage her to complete her mission. Iris continues to feel a sense of dread wash over her as Mundane relentlessly attacks her, causing her to feel like she is losing limbs. She notices his eyes and the way he shifts his gravity center, and realizes it's all due to his own incredible strength rather than any sort of artifact. As the crowd begins to grow disappointed in Iris, she becomes fed up and launches an attack of her own, only to discover that Mundane was merely manipulating her into thinking he had his sword drawn. In the end, he overpowers her and places his sword at her throat, causing her to wonder what went wrong. Meanwhile, Perv is left in a state of shock after watching Iris lose so easily, and Beatrix decides she wants to step up to fight Mundane. However, Rose suddenly appears and apologizes to her father for her past transgressions, and the king graciously forgives her. Perv is taken aback by the king's actions, but Rose takes things a step further by jumping at him and using her blade to take his life. As Perv's last moments come to an end, he tells Rose he loves her, leaving her to contemplate what she has just done. Mundane then takes it upon himself to reveal his true identity to the group, causing Rose to realize that he is the stylish bandit slayer from her past. She recalls how Sid had saved her from the bandits when she was younger, inspiring her to become a fencer herself. Despite the odds stacked against her, Rose is determined to continue fighting, prompting Beatrix to take on Shadow in an effort to stop her. But with Perv on the run and Shadow's true identity now out in the open, it seems like the battle is far from over. How will the people react now that Sid is revealed to be the wanted terrorist Shadow? As Mundane Man slips into the VIP setting, Iris catches a glimpse of his true appearance, and her eyes widen in surprise as she realizes it's none other than Shadow. Meanwhile, King Midgar receives some distressing news that the battle between Shadow and Beatrix could spill out of the stadium. Alarmed, he inquires about Perv's whereabouts and learns that the wily character is heading towards the outskirts on a carriage, possibly making a beeline for Oriana Kingdom. But that's not all. The king is also informed that Oriana's king body is in good hands and being taken care of. He advises his men to go through Marquess Grant when returning the body to the kingdom, warning them that the darkness that has lurked since ancient times has taken a deeper hue. As the intense battle between Shadow and Beatrix rages on, Iris steps onto the scene, brandishing a sword artifact. With graceful movements, Shadow outmaneuvers Beatrix, who is left scrambling to block his lightning-fast attacks. Seizing the moment, Iris boldly announces her intention to join the fray. She draws her weapon, revealing an intricate mithril blade etched with ancient runes, which surprises Shadow. Iris is not one to be underestimated, though. With a flick of her wrist, she sets the blade ablaze, transforming it into a massive fire sword. Shadow scoffs, remarking that it's more suited to a festive celebration, but the fiery sword quickly proves its worth. Beatrix and Iris team up to engage Shadow in a fierce battle, each determined to emerge victorious. Their fight wages on as the city serves as their battleground. With every move, Shadow and his opponents exchange strikes and blocks. Using 2 crowbars as his weapons, Shadow fends off both Iris and Beatrix, proving the power of even the most ordinary tools. Despite their best efforts, the trio ends up atop a train, with Shadow warning them to be cautious of their footing. Meanwhile, Rose escapes the stadium, uncertain of her next move. Just as she contemplates her next steps, Alpha appears, presenting Rose with a choice: continue fighting alone or join Shadow Garden. As Rose inquires about the possibility of saving Oriana Kingdom, Alpha explains that she cannot provide assistance at this time. If Rose desires to save her kingdom, she must first prove herself. With determination in her heart, Rose decides to join Shadow Garden. The battle intensifies as Shadow proves to be a worthy opponent. Beatrix finds herself questioning if they have crossed paths before, to which Shadow replies that he only remembers those who have given him a challenge. Taking advantage of his magic, Shadow manipulates the water and uses it to his advantage. But as the fight goes on, Beatrix manages to break his crowbar, giving her a glimmer of hope. However, Shadow proves to be a formidable opponent in both sword skill and physical strength. Iris vows to immobilize Shadow even if it costs her life. Beatrix charges up her attack and strikes Shadow, but he dodges her move and slams her over Iris before stopping them both. The battle rages on with no clear winner in sight. Shadow attempts to leave, but to no avail as the girls manage to stand up and confront him with courage. With a hint of desperation in her voice, Iris tells him that every knight in the city has been mobilized by now and that he has turned the whole kingdom against him. As she speaks, the tension in the air is palpable, and you can feel the intensity of the moment. Unfazed, Shadow starts laughing maniacally and then boldly declares that he is not running. He activates his power and covers most of the city with it, leaving the girls in awe of his abilities. The power he wields is immense, and you can't help but feel the dread that they must be experiencing. With a sudden burst of energy, Shadow begins to cast his I Am Atomic attack. The girls can feel the heat emanating from him, and it sends chills down their spines. However, just as quickly as he started, he stops before the end and disappears without a trace. As Iris drops to her knees and cries, you can feel her heartache and the weight of the situation. Sherry, on the other hand, reads on the newspaper that the demon Shadow was chased away by Iris and Beatrix, but the whereabouts of Rose, who had killed her own father, is still unknown. Beatrix, feeling defeated, decides to leave the city, but not without leaving words of encouragement to Iris. She reminds her not to take the defeat too seriously, as there are many things mortals can't defeat. Meanwhile, Beta realizes that Shadow's attack was a ploy to keep them occupied and out of Oriana Kingdom. They quickly decide to tie up loose ends, send more personnel to investigate the lawless city, and keep a close eye on the major corporate alliance. Later, with the new school term underway, Sid is left wondering where Skell is. Poe, who is always in the know, informs Sid that Skell has taken a long-term job, leaving Sid to ponder what it could be. As they chat, Poe reveals that he regrets being out of the city when the demon shadow appeared. The capital was cloaked in magic, which must have frightened many people, especially young girls who needed reassurance. Meanwhile, in a completely different world, Rose and Alpha find themselves in the Kagano domain. As they head deeper into the woods, Rose is taken aback by the magical beasts that infest the region. Alpha fills her in on Shadow's encounter with the Mist Dragon and his subsequent dubbing as ruler of the realm. The two of them finally arrive at Alexandria, which serves as Shadow Garden's base of operations. Alpha wastes no time introducing Rose to Lambda, the one responsible for her training. After explaining Rose's status as a new recruit, Lambda proceeds to cut Rose's clothes, casting away her name and identity to transform her into a pure, unadulterated soldier. As the dust settles, Rose is given a new identity, number 666, and added to Lambda's squad. That's it for the Eminence in Shadows Season 1. Stay tuned for the review and make sure to check out our other recaps.